Let's get right to our panel. Joining us now is political strategist Angela Rye, Professor Michael Eric Dyson of Georgetown University, and my colleague Crystal Ball, who of course is co-host of The Cycle. Professor, I'm keen, very keen, to hear your assessment of Mr. O'Reilly's sentimental yearning for a bygone era of the 1950s, because these sound like the crumbling thoughts of an individual who finds the modern world simply too much to bear.
Absolutely right. And what's interesting, of course, is that he's trapped in the paradox of nostalgia. And it's a paradox, Martin, because you're never present. You're looking toward a golden age that never existed, and you're looking forward to a future that can replicate that past, and you're missing what's going on today. Things were pretty rough for a lot of people, not just African-American people. Ask women. Ask the gender question if women were on equal footing to men. When father knew best, when Robert Montgomery walked into the room, women were subordinate to men. Think about it this way. Mr. O'Reilly did acknowledge that African-American people and other minorities didn't have it as good. Of course they didn't. Lassie had a show, Rin Tin Tin had a show, Mr. Ed had a show, but Nat King Cole could not get a show.
Incredible.
So a horse and two dogs
Absolutely.
could stay on television, but a black man couldn't.
Even though Nat King Cole could play the piano better than anybody else and had the voice of an angel, which is true.
It was extraordinary. Darling, Jebozambo.
Please,
so
Angela.
the reality is,
I thought you were going to come out with Sweet Lorraine. Angela, he does acknowledge that things were different for minorities before the civil rights era, Mr. O'Reilly, but it's something he says about a different group that also caught our attention. Take a listen to this, Angela.
There was a different attitude in America after World War II. Because we had won a hellacious war, white America was kind of unified, and standards of behavior were very similar. That unification made it easier for society to function.
Now again, Angela, we have to be fair. He's not saying that things were better for minorities in the 50s and 60s, but he does say that white America was kind of unified. So is he suggesting that the majority population has now been torn apart at the seams?
What it sounds to me like, Martin, is that Bill O'Reilly should have been a cameo on LL Cool J's latest song, Accidental Racist. Whether or not he means it or not, he's walked right into this one. White America was unified behind what exactly, right? This was the era where it was separate but unequal, as we like to call it. This is ridiculous. There's no point for him to be reflecting in any positive sense about the 1950s, where he talks about people were more respectful and they were more self-reliant. It's an absolute slap in the face to 2013 and everything that we stand for in this particular America.
And you know, Crystal, one is tempted to wonder what Mr. O'Reilly would think if he were to look out at Washington today on the Mall and see thousands of people campaigning for legal citizenship in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to throw one other thing out there,
Please.
He seems to conveniently forget that the top marginal tax rate in the 50s was 90%. But, you know,
maybe that had something to do with how perfect society was.
There as well. But the scene today is nothing short of inspirational. And I think what you realize is, as flawed as our democracy is, and as frustrating as it is when you see something like a 90% issue like universal background checks having trouble making it through. This is the essence of our democracy, and the one thing that really can put lawmakers in the hot seat and force change is when the citizenry is engaged and when they show up to vote as they did in the last election. There's no holding back those tides, as much as Bill O'Reilly might want to go back to 1950.
Sure, absolutely. Angela, the Senate's Gang of Eight says it's come up with an agreement now on immigration. We're just seeing these scenes in Washington. We've been told to expect them to unveil that agreement perhaps as early as this week. But then, of course, Senator Marco Rubio, a member of this gang, has warned the Senate not to move too fast, which isn't usually their problem, is it, Angela? They move extremely slowly normally.
Yeah, and I think that you'll continue to see that. At the earliest, there'll be a markup in the Judiciary Committee on the Senate side next week. But I'm hopeful that just, you know, walking over into the studio today, seeing thousands of people on the Mall in front of the Capitol, touting the importance of not only immigration, but a fuller, wholer America that reflects you know, the world's diversity, I think it's so important. So I hope the senators have the opportunity to go out to see the Rally for Citizenship. It's hosted by a whole bunch of different folks from NAACP to SEIU, and I really hope that it continues to apply the pressure necessary to move this bill along. It's not just the 71% of Latinos that voted for the president that support this. They have a full coalition, a rainbow coalition. So I'm really hopeful to see that something moves along a little quicker.
Professor Dyson, these are people who want to be legal taxpayers. They want to contribute to the citizenry of this great republic. They're not there to get sponge off the country and be takers. These are people who want to contribute, aren't they?
Absolutely. Let's leave all that to the notorious AIG to sponge off of the economy.
Right.
The hard-working Americans out here. And listen, Martin, they're already making a contribution,
of course,
to the till. Right? We understand that, and I know you understand that, but I want to underscore that. They're already making an enormous financial contribution to this country. The intellectual prowess they bring, the physical prowess they bring, the diversification that we all hunger for, that we say is the ostensible basis of American society, e pluribus unum, out of many one. And so what's disturbing about Bill O'Reilly's vision is that it's a unified whiteness that was fractured along class, that the poor white people were barely heard from. The people who were marginal, who were white, were never talked about. The white people who were sided with African and Latino and other peoples to forge a stronger coalition in this country were obscured. So Bill O'Reilly's nostalgia does a great disservice to the radical plurality of America to show forth. And something else, Martin, that he doesn't speak about. The GI Bill created the American middle class in this country in the 1940s and 50s. So what Bill O'Reilly is asking for is more social entitlement, because a returning soldier got some points on a test, got a hookup on a house, and got entrance into education with extra assistance. So the very thing that they now, that is the conservatives rail against, is what they were given in the 1940s and 50s, and as a result of that, it created the middle class as we know it. Read the book by Ira Katz-Nelson, When Affirmative Action Was White. That's what he wants to go back to, and that's what he doesn't want to deal with.
What a wonderful critique. Crystal, do Republicans understand that if they hold up this process of immigration reform, they are likely to pay a gain in the ballot box, aren't they?
Right. Well, there's a long-term, short-term problem here, right? For the long-term image of the Republican Party, there is no question what direction they have to go in. But for some of these members of Congress, for the short term, for 2014, that are running in homogenous districts, highly conservative districts, they're nervous about what they're going to be forced to vote on, what they're going to go on the record on. So it's the quandary, really, that the Republican Party has had for quite some time, where they're forced to, or they want to play to the base in this short-term strategy that over the long term is just destroying their party.
Devastating. Angela, you wanted to say something.
No, Martin, actually, I just, again, want to emphasize the importance of this particular bill moving forward.
Indeed. Absolutely. Angela Rye, the singing Professor Michael Eric Dyson, and the ever-fragrant Crystal Ball. Thank you all. Coming up, Rand Paul, the EPA's biggest critic, takes his message to Howard University. Stay with us.
The workers have been there.